Hello everyone, welcome to everyone's favorite kind of video on YouTube, a tier list. In this specific tier list, it's gonna be about sports. So let's jump right into it. We got S through D, the major categories, you know, S being the highest, D being the lowest, maybe the sports that you don't like. And what I'm gonna rate them based on is really everything. It's gonna come down to how fun it is to play the sport, how fun it is to watch the sport, you know, how available is the sport to be able to see, all the factors that come together. So let's jump right into it. First, I started with my favorite. This is kind of a cheap way to start, but Major League Baseball, or baseball as a whole, that's going all the way to S tier, and I'll tell you why. The sport itself is incredibly storied. It's been around for such a long time, and it has so much history interwoven into it. You know, you broke the color barrier with Jackie Robinson, which goes a long way, not only for sports, but for the country and the world as a whole. And not to mention, the game can be really, really fun. I know it gets a bad rap because it's slow and, you know, it's an old-timer sport, all that kind of stuff. They are working to get it faster. They're implementing a pitch clock next year. It's going to be a way quicker game, like 30 to 40 minutes are coming off each game because of this implementation. Baseball is just a great sport, and that's really all it comes down to. Next, we got basketball. So basketball is an interesting one. It's one of the fastest growing sports in the world. Obviously, a lot of people like it. It's a popular sport, but my beef with it is once it gets to a professional level, once it gets to the NBA level, it kind of gets boring for me. It's a lot more about one-on-one matchups once you make it to the NBA level. It's a lot more about getting the foul calls, getting to the line. It's a lot about taking time off, load management, and it's way less about the actual play designs and trying to come up with a clever, you know, attack towards another defense. It's my player versus your player to see who's better in the playoffs. Also, if you just look at the NBA, the playoffs aren't great, in my opinion. The regular season doesn't mean much. As far as playing the sport, it's really fun, and it's really fast-paced. You have to be in really good shape to be able to play this sport. So I'm ultimately going to give it an A, but the reason it doesn't go an S is because of what happens at the professional level. Now we take a look at boxing, and the thing with boxing is it's such a fun sport. It's such a sport you can get into, and sort of like basketball, you have the my best player versus your best player, but there are no teams. It's just one guy versus another guy, so it's my guy versus yours. The one thing I don't love about it is it really promotes just beating the crap out of someone when you don't like them.
I don't know what it is about your face, but I want to deliver one of these right in your suck hole.
Is there anything I can do to work on that?
No, not really. It's your face.
In a lot of ways, it becomes sort of toxic. It's not as bad as, you know, like the WWE, but it still has that side to it. That being said, there is an art and a skill to it. These guys have been training their whole lives for this, and obviously all these guys want to do this. The sport as a whole, I think, is pretty good. I'm going in between B and A tier right now. I'm gonna put it in B for right now just because it's not my favorite sport in the world, but it is a good sport. We'll see if that changes. Cricket. Now, this is maybe the most underrated sport in America right now. Cricket is just such a fun sport. That's something Americans don't understand because there is a little bit of like a learning curve in getting into it, but it's way quicker to learn than like baseball, right? And I think that's a big turnoff for a lot of people is like, oh, it's ancient baseball. Why would I watch it if I have current baseball? In a lot of ways, it's way faster paced than baseball. In a lot of ways, there are things that are more fun about it than baseball. There's a lot of action. There's way more scoring. For cricket, man, just give it a try. Just watch it. Try it. Once you can try to understand like what it is, it's great. John Boy Media has a great like little series they have about it where they play it in a warehouse with the blitz ball. It's fun. It's fun. Give it a shot. This is S tier. Cross country. Now this one's near and dear to my heart. I ran cross country for a total of 5 years throughout middle school and high school. Running was an everyday thing for me for 5 years. So obviously got a little bit of bias coming into this, but objectively, let's look at this. It's horrible to watch. It's maybe the most boring sport to watch possible because it's just a bunch of guys or girls just running, and that's it. That's the whole thing. And it's not even like a short sprint, a short race. It's a long race where generally the people who are in front at the start are the people who are in front at the end, and the people who are in the back stay in the back. As far as actually doing it, it is fun, right? It's a race. It's, you know, all your training coming into one moment. The runner's high is real. Like, after you get done with the run, you feel great almost every single time. You're really a part of a community too, like a little family that you get because of running with it. So that aspect, you know, team versus team is also a big part of it, but it also is individualized a little bit as well. So, you know, all that in mind, I'm going to put it at an A just because I do like it so much. But if I didn't have the experience I had with it, I'd probably have it at a C or a B. Field hockey. All right, stop everything. Field hockey. All right, let me ask you this. Have you ever watched a field hockey game? If you haven't, don't. You'd waste your time. If you have, I'm sorry for you. Okay, field hockey is one of the worst sports I have ever seen in my life. I broadcasted several field hockey games when I was in college, and let me tell you something, it was horrible. It had nothing to do with whether my team was good or bad. The actual sport was horrible. I got to see one of the best teams in the nation, actually ranked number 4 at the time, play one of the worst teams possible, and there wasn't much of a difference. The final score was big, you know, it was like 9-point spread, but watching the actual gameplay, nothing. Also, there's like no plays. There's like, I know there is plays. All right, that's the thing. Let me clarify. I know there are plays in this sport, and they like set them up and their strategy or whatever. It sure doesn't look like it when you're watching it, man. It looks like a bunch of kids running around smacking a ball like they're in 5th grade playing this sport for the first time at the collegiate level, and like that. I don't mean this to like hate on the athletes or the coaches or whatever. It's just the sport looks like something a child would play. And yes, I guess that's what sports are. But it looks like something a child would play without much structure or coaching or anything that goes into it, man. It really just looks like a free-for-all, and just anything that happens goes. So, I mean, watching this, I did not enjoy it in any way, shape, or form. That's a D. Yuck. Okay, American football. Now, this one's a lot of people are going to be very divisive about. It's in America, it's the number 1 sport, obviously. Outside of America, you know, a lot of people don't really care about it or aren't that invested. It's basically advanced rugby where you can actually throw the ball forward, complete passes that way. It's a little bit more structured. There's a little bit more like stoppage of plays, startage of plays, all that sort of thing. There's legit penalties that come in frequently. The thing about the sport is even if you throw the head injuries away, even if you forget about the fact that people get messed up for the rest of their lives after this, people still get hurt with other injuries all the time. And I know that happens in sports. I know that's a thing. But in football, American football especially, you have to count on like 50% of your team getting hurt every single year. That's not just like a sometimes thing or like, whoa, this was a bad year for injuries. That's like a given for every single season that about half your team, at least half your starters, are going to get hurt at some point and miss significant time, potentially the entire year. That's what's so mind-blowing to me about this sport, is just how brutal it is on players' bodies, and they're training for this. They play 17 regular season games, and it is so hard for them to play all 17 every single year, or even close to it. Like, they're playing half if they're lucky, unless they're maybe a quarterback where they're actually protected by all the rules and, you know, blockers and everything else. That part of it really kills it for me. That part of it makes it really hard to 100% invest and root for it because of the injuries that happen. Also, you throw in the head thing, that hurts it. But the game itself is really fun. The game itself is great. The game itself shows potential for low scoring games and high scoring games. It's not all one or the other. Football is all strategy too. Like there's a ton of just like brute force and muscle, but like there's a ton of strategy that comes into it as well. So that's what I really like about it. But of course, you know, I've mentioned all my issues I had with it. That being said, I'm going to put it in a B. The injuries bring it down that far for me. If the injuries weren't such a big deal, I'd probably have it at like an A or an S. Golf. All right. I mean, let's talk about it. This is maybe the most boring sport to watch possible. And I know I said that earlier, but like this is legit. This is like the meme. This is the one everyone considers to be the most boring sport possible. I hate watching it. Playing it is a different story. Playing it can be fun. You know, it's a good get out of the house and do something activity on a nice day, hang out with some friends, and that's pretty much it. It's getting a C. C. Gymnastics. This sport's great. All right, it gets a lot of hate because it's a generally female sport, or, you know, like, oh, it's not some big manly sport. It is. All right, there's so much that goes into this sport. There's so much training. These people are incredibly strong. All of them, every single one. And they're so talented. All the balancing they can do, all the control they have over their body, with all of that strength and power all like jammed into one person is insane. The fact that people can do this, the fact that humans have the ability to do this is unreal. The big negative is it's really only around in the winter. You don't really see it for the rest of the year, and the only time you ever really see it on a big stage is the Olympics. So I feel like it's a sport that could be bigger than it is. But right now, as it stands, it is B tier. B tier. Ice hockey, okay. Ice hockey is really fun. Ice hockey is one of those sports where you watch it and every single time you're entertained in some way or another. There's fights that break loose. There's, you know, really low scoring, but when the scores happen, they're really exciting. Although it has the potential to be high scoring, it's just rare. I mean, it's just fast paced. It's fun, even if there's not a lot of scoring happening. Even if it's shot after shot after shot being saved and the score is 0-0, it's still fun to watch just because of how fast it is and all the changing that's happening. The personnel is constantly coming in and off the ice. Fun to watch all around. I'm going to give it an A. Figure skating. This is another one of those sports that you really only see at the Olympic level usually when you're going to stumble across it in a broadcast of some kind. Again, it is people who are very in great shape who have been training for this forever. But for me personally, just watching it, I get bored to sleep. Yes, what they're doing is impressive. Yes, what they're doing is, you know, beautiful. It's a sport. It's an art, right? But I'm ranking this based on its ability as a sport, not as an art. And when it comes to a sport, if it's putting me to sleep, that's a big...
It's a no for me, dog.
So I mean, this is either C or D, and just picking between the two, I'm putting it in D. I'll move it up to C just because I do appreciate the art aspect, but it's still boring. Lacrosse, the world's fastest growing sport. Now this one's really fun to watch. All right, I got to see my first lacrosse game last year in person. I mean, it lived up to the hype. I really see why people like this sport so much. This sport is so fun on so many different levels. It's fast paced. It's a team aspect. It's not just one person versus another. The only thing is it's very small right now in terms of getting it broadcasted everywhere. I mean, college is maybe the biggest like lacrosse that you can find right now, and the professional level, like I want to see more of that. I want that to be around more, you know? So right now I'm putting it at an A, but it could be significantly higher, well, S, if it actually, you know, showed up. Skateboarding. This one's fun. This one's an Olympic sport, which is crazy that a sport like this has become Olympic, but I totally see why, and I think it deserves to be there because it is such a fun sport. It's a mixture of art, like I talked about from ice skating, but it's also got that like aspect of, oh, they might die. It's one of those sports where they're doing something so incredibly dangerous but also incredibly masterful and artful at the same time that it's just fun to watch. The problem is I can't watch, hours of this. I can watch this for like maybe 30 minutes before I get bored and really have to watch something else. After you've seen it for a little while, it's just like you kind of seeing the same thing over and over again. There's got to be more added to it, more stakes, because right now it's a lot like surfing, where you just kind of ride the wave, ride the course, and do whatever cool tricks you can think of at that point. There's got to be some sort of like parameters added for me to make it like more death-defying, if you will. So right now I'm putting it at B. Skiing. This one is another Olympic sport that's, cool in concept. Actually doing it, I can't speak to it myself, but I know it's something that wears and tears on you over time, and you can get messed up from in the lower body. It's fast. It's one person versus another. It's a time-based thing. There are some cool tricks that can happen depending on which event you're looking at. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't seek this one out. I'm putting this at C tier. Snowboarding. So this is like skiing, but if you turned it up a little bit and made it more death-defying, more scary, more fun. Again, you really only see it during either the X Games or during the Olympics. It helps that it has the X Games, so that definitely pushes it up for me. So I'm gonna put it at a B tier. I'm not putting it at A or an S because, again, I wouldn't seek this out necessarily, but if it's on my screen, I'm not turning it off. That's the thing with a lot of these sports in B tier, except for with the exception of American football. If it's on my screen, I'm watching it, but I kind of won't go out of my way to find it. Next, we got soccer or football for the rest of the world. Why is it called soccer in America? I don't really know, because they wear socks. I mean, everyone wears socks. But you know what? In America, we make things how we want to make them. We call them what we want to call them, no matter how wrong it is. We blast through all the correct answers with wrong ones. We rewrite history to be wrong, and we are proud of it. So this is going to be called soccer in this tier list. Oh, God. All right, so soccer. I played this sport a lot when I was very young. It's a sport that's either fun or boring depending on the day, depending on the game. It's another one of those sports where it's like your best player versus my best player all of the time, which I don't love. There is a space for that. That needs to be a part of the sport. If soccer didn't have that, I don't think soccer would be anywhere near as big as it is. However, the big reason why it is a worldwide sport and the #1 sport is because it is so easy to play this sport. You just need a ball and a field. That's it. That's everything. You don't need all these pads like hockey players have. You don't need a stick. You don't need a bat. You just need a ball in your own 2 feet in a field. But for me, watching it is brutal. It can be really, really brutal. Ending in ties, that's a big thing. America just ended in a tie not too long ago in the World Cup, and everyone over here hated it. To me, that is an interesting angle to this. Sometimes teams are on the same level. Sometimes teams are at the same point one day. And just because there has to be a winner in other sports and they just slightly edge out the other team, doesn't mean that they're necessarily a significantly better team or a better team even. It's just the team that got the upper hand right at the last second. I think that teaches a valuable lesson where in America we've kind of forgotten that, like, hey, you're either good or you're bad. That's it. Sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes you're both, on an equal playing field, and it's not like a good versus a bad at the end of the day. It's a one soccer team versus another soccer team. That being said, I don't seek this one out. I don't watch it a lot. I'm putting it at C tier. And I know for the rest of the world, it's probably an A or an S. It's C. Softball, one of the most hated on sports there is. And I really don't understand why. I get there's not a lot of professional softball to watch out there aside from the Olympics, but man, softball is fun. Softball is like if baseball was quicker paced and smaller scale, but still somehow better. So somehow the pitchers are better, but the offense is also like better. They shrink it down to 7 innings, right? I like that a lot. When they implemented 7-inning doubleheaders for that 1 year in Major League Baseball, I'm one of the few people who actually liked it just because things went faster and the early game meant more and the middle game meant more. Whereas in baseball, early rallies might not mean a whole lot by the end of the game. So softball is truly a sport where every single pitch matters because it's so much shorter. And let me tell you something, there is never a dull moment. Like, even when it's a pitching first game, it's still fun. They're still in it, and it's still great to watch. I'm putting it at S tier because softball is great and we need more of it. All right, swim and dive. I know it's kind of a lot of things to put into one little category, but watching it can be fun. But all right, so like the events like diving and then like the synchronized stuff, like that gets really, really boring after the second or like third pair you've seen go. However, the actual racing, the lengths of the pool, that is where stuff gets fun, especially the relays. The relays are maybe the most fun thing about swim and dive. There is a lot of upside to swim and dive. However, there's a lot of downside as well. A sport that's hard to get into. It's a sport that's hard to root for certain players, competitors, I guess I should say. And because of that, I'm putting it at C. The sport itself is good, you know, but as far as watching it and being like enthralled in it, it's not that great. Tennis is kind of in a similar spot for me. Tennis is one of those sports that you just watch. It's on in the background at like a bar or something, and that's pretty much it. I do not find myself ever just sitting and watching a tennis match. It's more fun to play than it is to watch. I will give it that 100%. And watching the best athletes in the world compete at it is fun, but I can't just sit and watch tennis game after tennis tennis match. It gets old after a while. Like one match is kind of like where I'm at. For me, it's C tier. Again, I'm not seeking it out. If it's on, I'm probably going to turn the channel off. Maybe. Track and field. This is very similar to swim and dive. It's hard to watch things like long jump and high jump and triple jump and stuff like that. Pole vaulting. It gets boring after a while because it's the same thing over and over again with a lot of space in between each one. That's something I didn't mention in the swim and dive. There's a lot of space in between each of those competitors. The actual racing is the best part, and the relays are the very best part. Distance running, again, boring to watch like I mentioned in cross country. As far as participating in it, I found it as very isolating, very individualized until a relay was brought in. Then it felt like a team thing. Then it felt like I needed to hold up my end of the bargain. Whereas when it was just me racing against everyone, it just felt like, well, I mean, I can run fast or slow. Either way, that doesn't impact really anything other than where I show up. If you have someone you're rooting for, it can be really fun. But outside of that, it gets kind of boring. C tier. Volleyball, another one of those sports that, you know, only shows up around Olympic time, except for maybe their college version of the sport. It's fun. Volleyball's great. And it does not have to just be a female sport. It is an all gender inclusive sport. You should play it. It's fast paced. There's a lot of skill involved. There's moving around. There's trusting your teammates. It's team versus team. It's who is better as a team, not who has one player that's better than your best player. To me, that's what really makes a sport fun, and that is going to go into S tier. Wrestling. Now, this is kind of the opposite of what I was just saying. It's our best player versus your best player, so to speak. This is sort of a team aspect. It's a series of your best wrestlers against a series of the other team's best wrestlers. Sort of like baseball, except in baseball, you know, you have runners on base. More than one person in the defense besides the pitcher. To watch, it's either brutally slow and not a lot's happening, or it's incredibly exciting and the crowd is into it. I've seen it both ways, and it's one of those sports that can be great. It can be awesome, but there's a lot of times where it's just two guys hugging each other and not a lot's happening. That's what takes it away from me. To compete in it, I'm sure it's a lot of fun. I knew a lot of wrestlers back in high school. They said they loved it for the most part, besides the training, you know. So for me, this is going to go into B tier, again, it's one of those things that if it pops up on my screen, I'm probably not going to turn it off, but I probably wouldn't seek it out. So here's a final look, S through D tier, what I ended up choosing for this tier maker. 22 different sports, only one of them ended up in D, that's field hockey. At S, I've got baseball, cricket, softball, and volleyball. Let me know if you agree, let me know if you disagree. Just rake me over the coals with what I got wrong in this one, or sports I left out for that matter. Be sure to check out my next video.